It's 7 p.m. Alex texts Quinn. No reply. By 9 p.m., he's not just annoyed. He's convinced he doesn't matter to him. Quinn walks in the door. Alex is cold. Quinn gets defensive. Within 10 minutes, they're in the same fight they've had 100 times. Same words, same outcome, same silence before bed.
All right, Alex and Quinn aren't a bad couple here. And it's not that they're incompatible either. They're just stuck in a pattern. Today, we're going to give you a prompt that lets you see your own pattern clearly, perhaps even for the first time.
This is the AI Therapy Podcast,
where we discuss mindful use of AI for self-help. A consumer insights nerd
and a techie are joined by a practicing psychologist to unpack when AI can be helpful, where it shouldn't be used, and best ways to interact with AI to get the support you need. AI Therapy Podcast. Practical tools, real talk, and a mindful take on technology. Welcome back, everyone. So as you've probably figured out, today we're going to be talking about relationships. But a quick note before we dive in, we're going to do something a little bit different today. As you know, usually we cover both the theory and the prompt and kind of how AI applies to it in one episode. This topic is so rich and we're all so excited about it that instead today what we're going to do is we're going to break this topic into 2 episodes.
Yeah. So today we're going to be going all in on the prompt specifically. And we're going to walk you through how this prompt will help you identify your own relationship pattern bit by bit.
Right. And then in the next episode, we're going to go deep on the science. So the 2 episodes are really designed to work together. Okay, let's get started with some stats. So on average, couples wait 6 years of ongoing distress before they seek help. 6 years, think about that. That's a long period of time.
That's really long.
But here's the hopeful part. About 70% of couples who do get therapy report real improvement. And here's another stat for you. 60 to 70% move to from a state of stress and anxiety in their relationship to then a state of calm and stability. So that is true improvement. The approach that this prompt is based on, it's called emotionally focused therapy, EFT, has some of the strongest research behind it of any couple intervention.
And this is definitely the approach that I tend to use the most when I do relational work in my private practice. And to be honest with you, this dynamic from Alex and Quinn is a very common type of cycle that I see in couples. And the start is very important. It takes couples a long time to get to therapy and for things to really deteriorate since they actually come and seek for help. Like Masha said, 6 years sounds very intuitive to me. So by the time most couples show up to therapy, these patterns are really deeply entrenched. The positive part here is that once you're able to identify the pattern, once you're able to identify it, the way we call it in EFT, the cycle, you are taking the very important step to be able to minimize and prevent those destructive dynamics in your relationships.
By the way, the prompt is, as always, in the show notes if you want to follow along. All right, so now we're going to get into the core of this prompt. And this is where the prompt is really, it really earns its weight because each component, as you will see, is doing something very, very specific from a psychological perspective and how it's leaning on EFT. So Herrick is always our great guinea pig here. He's gonna.
I don't know why it's always me, but okay.
He's gonna take us through the steps and also role play for us today.
Yay! Okay. Okay, we actually start off with getting the first stage of it is really getting the facts correct. So getting it all out there, and we have the prompt tell the AI to help the user describe what happened, what was said, what was done, how they responded, and how their partner responded to make sure to keep everything factual.
Right.
Because that's pretty key.
Mm-hmm.
And if the user starts interpreting or blaming, we tell the AI to gently note the difference between, what happened and the meaning they're actually making out of it.
Right.
All right, so back to the role play. So I'm going to have a live conversation and you guys will hear what I say and what AI is going to respond with. Okay, here's my input. I messaged Alex asking him when he's gonna be home, and he didn't respond for like 2 hours. At 9, he finally came in, and I just looked at him and said, "Hey," and then I looked back at the TV. He gave me a hey back and then just walked into the bedroom. Instead of apologizing and ignoring me, he went straight to bed.
Thank you for sharing that. What happened on the surface? The goal here is simply to slow the moment down and describe the interaction as clearly as possible before we interpret it. From what you described, here's the sequence I'm hearing. You texted Alex asking when he'd be home. You didn't get a response for about 2 hours. Around 9 p.m., he came home. When he walked in, you looked at him, said hey, and turned back to the TV. He said hey back and then went into the bedroom and went to bed. There wasn't any further conversation in that moment. Is that an accurate description of the observable events? I'm intentionally separating what happened from what it meant, because our minds naturally fill in meaning very quickly. For example, he ignored me. He didn't care. He should have apologized. Those interpretations are really important too. We'll get to them. But first, we're just mapping the moment.
So AI did a good job of slowing things down to allow me to process the situation, ultimately separating between the observation or facts and the interpretations, which I think is generally a good practice to do. And from there, I had a few more back and forths with AI where I gave it a bit more information about my thoughts, things like when he's out, am I on his mind? And maybe I care for him more than he cares for me. And we also talked about some feelings that I was encountering, such as ultimately being pissed off at him.
Mm.
And back to AI's question that it had for me, where it said, when you look underneath the anger, do you notice any other feelings there? Aside from being pissed and angry at the situation and him, I kind of think about what I mean to him and ultimately, like, do I matter? Like, does he care about me at all?
Thank you for going there. That's a really important layer you just named. What you said, do I matter? Does he care about me at all? Touches something very central in close relationships. In attachment terms, one of the deepest questions we carry with the people we love is exactly that. Do I matter to you? So if we slow that moment down, we're starting to see the emotional layers. What happened? You texted asking when he'd be home and didn't get a reply for 2 hours. The thoughts that came up, he doesn't care. I care more about him than he cares about me. The surface emotion, secondary emotion. Anger, feeling really pissed off. Underneath that, a much more vulnerable question. Do I matter to him? That deeper question can feel really painful to sit with. And when that kind of vulnerability gets triggered, many people instinctively protect themselves, often with anger, distance, or shutting down a bit. Now let's gently start looking at step 2, the interaction between the two of you, the pattern that unfolded. From your description, something like this might have happened. 1, you reached out by text in a way that may have also been a bid for connection. 2, there was no reply for a while. 3, inside, painful thoughts and an anger built up. 4, when he came home, instead of moving toward him, you turned back to the TV and kept things brief. 5, he responded briefly and then went to the bedroom. When couples get caught in moments like this, it can sometimes become a pursuit withdrawal type cycle. One person reaches or hopes for connection. Something doesn't land right. The hurt turns into anger or distance. The other person then pulls back further.
That's a really great identification of a cycle. I mean, what the prompt does for us is really map the primary and secondary emotions and start to link them to behaviors and to responses and explaining how the cycle reinforces itself. So let's say Herrick feels hurt, he starts closing off, and how that comes through to the partner, who in turn also feels threatened and rejected, and that becomes even less responsive. and so on and so forth. And then sort of the cycle keeps on reinforcing itself.
Okay, and then after a bit of an interaction with AI, Herrick answered a couple more questions. Now we finish with a full integration. So this is the moment, this is our final aha moment where AI pulls everything together, right? So the situation, the cycle, the primary and the secondary emotion, the attachment need, the tendencies, everything kind of comes as a very coherent, clear reflection. So we'll play them up to you now, which is really the final reveal, so to say.
Your side of the cycle. 1. The trigger. What happened? You texted Alex asking when he'd be home. He didn't reply for about 2 hours. R2. The meaning your mind made during the silence. Thoughts started forming, such as, he doesn't care. Even when I'm out, I think about him. Why isn't he thinking about me? I care more about him than he cares about me. These interpretations are very common when connection feels uncertain. They're your mind trying to make sense of the silence. 3. The secondary emotion, what showed on the surface. The main feeling that showed up outwardly was anger, being really pissed off. Anger often acts as a protective emotion. It helps us defend ourselves when something deeper feels painful or threatening. 4. The primary emotion, what was underneath. Under the anger was a much more vulnerable experience. Hurt, doubt about your importance to him. The question, do I matter to him? This is a classic attachment trigger when something in the interaction makes us question the security of the bond. R5, the attachment need. The deeper need that was activated was reassurance of connection. I matter to you. You're thinking about me even when we're apart. Our relationship is important to you. When you imagined the repair you wanted, it sounded like, open quote, I didn't mean to ignore you. I was just busy. But you really matter to me, close quote. That kind of message would have soothed the attachment alarm that got triggered. R6, your move in the interaction. When he arrived home, instead of expressing the hurt directly, you said, hey, turned back to the TV, stayed somewhat distant. Inside, though, you were hoping he would notice you were upset and come comfort you. This kind of move is very common when someone feels vulnerable. It's a protective protest, not wanting distance, but hoping the other person will recognize the hurt and move closer. Half measure, 7. What happened next? He said, hey, and went to the bedroom. From your perspective, that likely reinforced the painful belief. See, he really doesn't care, which likely increased the hurt and anger. Understanding this map gives you more choice next time. For example, instead of the cycle going, hurt, anger, distance, more distance, you might experiment with expressing the vulnerable layer more directly. If it feels safe enough, such as, open quote, when you didn't reply for a long time, I started feeling like maybe I didn't matter to you. I know that might not have been what was happening, but that's where my mind went, close quote. That kind of sharing can sometimes help partners see the real feeling underneath the reaction.
This is great. This is great. I mean, it's obviously very long, and to not bore you folks, we didn't play the entire mapping that AI gave us, but it touches on all the key components and does very effective psychoeducation, considering that it's one partner working in a relational pattern.
That conversation and interpretation was so fascinating. So let's take a couple of minutes to understand why this prompt was so successful. And it really has to do with the boundaries and the very specific instructions that we've given to the prompt. Herrick, do you want to kick us off on the instructions?
First part of the prompt, we are trying to tell the AI that you are not a therapist. You're not a couples counselor. You're not an advice machine. You are a pattern explorer. And that's really, really important because it's actually one of the key prompt designs that we made. And Nate's going to talk to us a little bit more about why we made that specific distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important point here, right? So it's important to say that, I mean, this prompt in this case, what we've designed, it's for one person, one partner to work on the relational issues on their own. It is not couples therapy. In fact, I mean, what I want folks to understand that you can't really do effective couples therapy with only one partner. And the reality is, and research confirms that trying to do it can actually make things worse. So in this case, folks, what I want you to understand is that the work that this prompt will facilitate for you is for individual person, and it has its very serious limitation. So all this prompt can do is help you understand your part in the dynamic.
Right. And I actually want to just pause on that for a second because that's a really, really important frame that runs through the entire prompt that you'll see. So everything that you explore is based on your subjective experience. Your partner's experience of the same dynamic could be completely different, right? Like two sides of every story, basically, to simplify it.
Then we also told the AI to draw on emotionally focused therapy, which we're going to go deeper into in the next episode, and attachment theory as its guiding framework. And the reason why that's really important is like, if you don't give it a specific framework, AI generally will just give you some sort of generic relationship advice and be like, communicate better, be more empathetic. How about try active listening?
I like your AI voice.
And that's what I think, in my head, that's how I thought AI sounds like. But anyways, we want better responses than that. So by by telling AI to anchor and use EFT, we're giving it a specific lens to work through. So just really by telling it that, it really changes the questions that it's going to ultimately ask you. It really guides it in terms of the patterns that it looks out for and just the way it thinks about your conversation.
Okay. So now that we've covered that, let's move on to the boundaries. So I mentioned that we've put in some boundaries into here, and you know that we've done that pretty much with every prompt we've done so far. So this is not surprising. But this is kind of the part of the prompt, this is kind of that you don't see in all AI prompts and you don't see in a lot of AI tools. So what we have done here is we wrote 5 specific things that AI has to tell us before we start doing any work with it, before any conversation even begins. Herrick, do you want to kick us off and start walking through these?
Okay, so the first thing of the boundaries is actually similar to what I've talked about earlier in the episode here. It's really saying that I am not your therapist. Let me say it again. I am not your therapist. And that this is a self-reflection exercise, not therapy. And that's hopefully straightforward to everyone here. We want to make sure everyone's aware of that. And the second one is one of that we kind of said is most important boundary in the entire prompt, at least when we discussed it among ourselves. And it's really stating that our goal is to help you understand your part in this pattern. I'm kind of doing air quotes here, but it's like your part. And it takes 2 to create a relational cycle. And we only have one side of the story here, and that is yours. This is really just to try to prevent AI from, doing what it does really well, which is like relaying everything and back to you like an echo chamber and agreeing with everything you say. So we want to pretty much put this in here so that it becomes the anti-sycophancy engine. Again, the whole phrase about sycophancy is around when they really agree with everything that you say. Nate, you want to kick us off on the third boundary?
Yeah, sure. So the third boundary goes back to the principle that I mentioned earlier. So the principle about recognizing limitations of doing relational work with only one partner. And our next boundary, as you see in the prompt, the fourth boundary builds on that. That it reminds that this exercise is not a substitute for couples therapy. It can't replace working with both partners and a trained professional. So the next boundary is very critical and it's based on research and clinical best practice. It's the safety screen. And this one I really want folks to take in very seriously. The prompt tells AI, if physical violence or threats of violence come up, stop the exercise immediately. Don't explore it as part of the cycle. Don't minimize it. What you need to do is flag it, recommend professional help and safety resources, and exit the exercise.
Right, of course. And that safety screen, it was something we tested pretty extensively because, if you're designing any AI prompt that touches on sensitive personal topics like the ones we're discussing here, you absolutely need to make sure that you test it kind of with very obvious disclosures, but also something that's less obvious. Nate, do you want to finish with the last section of the prompt?
So the next section of the prompt basically tells it what not to do. We won't get into much detail here because we already talked about the rationale behind it and what we do, but we tell it to not pathologize, not stigmatize, not to label. Because of sycophancy, AI tends to do that stuff. But it's dangerous and not useful because those labels would be based on one partner's description of what they experienced, and it limits down the exploration rather than opening it up.
Okay, so before we wrap up for today, why should our listeners care? What are they getting out of this episode?
Well, in this case, it's going to be, relying back on that fact about the 6 years. We don't want people to wait 6 years. We want to make sure you have a chance to understand what's going on and not have to wait till things are actually terrible before you go for solving it. So the prompt will give you the tools and something very concrete. It's essentially giving you a map to your own relationship pattern. You can't change a pattern you can't see. So what we're really teaching here is like being able to identify and see that pattern. And from there, you're going to be able to actually see and make change in your life.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's the key in EFT. That's what we try to do with clients first. So once you do this work, the idea is that the next time the pattern starts, instead of just sort of like being on autopilot and reacting the way you usually would react, the way you usually would get triggered, you ideally would have increased awareness of being able to be more mindful of the moment. So being able to recognize the pattern, being able to pick up on the cycle before it kicks in. And that moment is a key in terms of changing relational dynamics.
This was a really fascinating conversation. I'm already I feel like I can share this with so many of people I know and my friends that I think can find it really useful. If you think so too, please make sure you share it so folks can really learn to identify their own relationship patterns and use this amazing free tool that we've developed for them. As always, let's close with a quick roundtable wrap up. Nate, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. So what is really important for me that folks take away from this is that you really don't need to fix relationship entirely by using this prompt. That won't be a realistic expectation. If all you get out of it is starting to see the cycle, starting to recognize the cycle, to understand it, to step outside of it enough to say, oh, that's the cycle, and here is my part in it, that moment is already very key, very instrumental, I would say.
I guess for me, it's like going into the individual steps a bit more. But even if you do a little exercise on your own terms and be like, hey, remembering that you're only one side of the coin, and you can even just do the small tidbit of saying like, what is fact and what is your own observation, and trying to like write that down yourself. Then you can be like, okay, these observations I'm having are maybe stirring my emotions, but they're not proven. So don't dwell on it as much as you can, at least.
Right, right. And for me, I think the part that was interesting is remembering, the cycle is the enemy. It's not one of the partners. So it takes two to tango, and it's not me, it's not you. It's kind of our dynamic, and that's something that we could work on together. Well, thank you so much for listening. Again, we really hope you found it useful. We're so happy we can bring you these great free tools that you all can use, share with whoever you think will find them helpful. So please do go ahead and try it, get the PDF, copy paste it into your AI and see how it works for you. If you're enjoying this content, please follow and like us. Just to timestamp this conversation, we're recording this in March of 2026. We do this because AI changes very, very quickly. So just want you to know where we're at today.
Thanks for joining us today. Just a quick reminder before you go. This episode is educational and not a substitute for professional care, and listening does not create a therapist-client relationship. If you are in immediate danger or at risk of harming yourself or someone else, call your local emergency number or contact a crisis line right away. All right, we'll see you in the next episode.